Is the Labour Party inciting violence against Reform voters by calling them racist? Nigel Farage thinks so.
This language will incite and encourage the radical left. I'm thinking of Antifa and other organisations like that. It directly threatens the safety of our elected officials and our campaigners.
The Prime Minister called Reform's policies racist.
Well, I do think that it is a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is calling them racist.
I don't have a window into Nigel's soul, but I did see the leaflet that Reform put out in a by-election in Scotland that basically said that Anas Sarwar would prioritise the interests of the Pakistani community. I thought that was a racist leaflet.
Justice Secretary David Lammy is calling them racist.
He must call his scheme to round up and deport our French, our Indian, our Caribbean neighbours who already have indefinite leave to remain what it is. It is racist. I say not in our country, not in our name, not in our time.
Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson is calling them racist.
You say Nigel Farage is racist?
It's hard to escape the conclusion that because many of the things that he does and says, I think, drift into racism, it's hard to escape that conclusion.
And it's not hard to guess who Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is referring to when she says this.
Patriotism, a force for good, is turning into something smaller, something more like ethno-nationalism, which struggles to accept that someone who looks like me and has a faith like mine can truly be English or British.
In his big speech today, Sir Keir Starmer used language like this.
We must go into that battle armed, not just with words and condemnation, but with action. And that means tackling all the problems.
We must go into battle armed, not just with words, but with actions. And then, after Sir Keir Starmer finished speaking, David Lammy sunk to a new low by saying this about Nigel Farage.
Is Nigel Farage a racist?
I answered your question. I'm not going to play the man. I'm playing the ball as our leader did. I will leave it for the public to come to their own judgments about someone who once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger.
Aside from the fact that you just can't really go around saying that people love Hitler, it's also highly defamatory, which is why I suspect the lawyers got onto Mr. Mastermind.
He has denied it, and so I accept that he has denied it, and I would like to clarify that position because, in the end, the Prime Minister was keen for us to focus on the policies, not the individual.
Well, there's not a sorry in there, is there? And it's disgusting language to use in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination when people on TikTok have already appeared to want Nigel Farage to be done next. Nigel Farage has already been attacked multiple times. That one was with a milkshake, this one was with rocks. It wasn't that long ago that comedian Joe Brand suggested dousing him with battery acid.
Why bother with a milkshake when you could get some battery acid?
Sir Keir Starmer's speech was basically all about flags today.
Flags. Flag. Flag. Flags. Flag.
Bit ironic, given it's Labour councils who've been removing Union and St George's flags all around the country.
What are you doing? Leave it. Leave it. You lefty.
Sir Keir Starmer was hoping to ignite some patriotic enthusiasm. Well, it's a shame that his cabinet didn't seem to like it. Rachel Reeves looked like she'd been crying again.
Just from the top, but from the grassroots. Because...
And Ed Miliband and Bridget Phillipson looked like they just didn't want to be there. Look, when it comes to the racism stuff, when David Lammy says things like this...
Is Nigel Farage a racist?
I answered your question. I'm not going to play the man. I'm playing the ball as our leader did. I will leave it for the public to come to their own judgments about someone who once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger.
They want people to think that Reform voters are racist. They want people to think that all Reform politicians are racist. They want people to think that Farage is like Hitler. What that does is put a target on people's backs. It puts lives at risk, and I think they know exactly what they're doing. Let's get thoughts on my panel. We've got GBU superstar Will Kingston, journalist and broadcaster Linda Duberley, and we also have journalist Jonathan Lis. Will, I'll start with you. I mean, that David Lammy thing straight away there, really. I mean... What do you think? I mean, it wasn't an apology, was it? I mean, what's going on with David? You can't go around saying that people, you know, flirted with the Hitler Youth.
No, he said, I want to play the ball and not the man, and then gone in and rugby tackled Nigel Farage in rhetorical terms.
Yeah.
The language is incredibly irresponsible. It creates a permission structure for violence, which we've seen on the left in the US for years and years now. But, Patrick, that's not even my biggest concern about this. The thing which really annoys me, and here's the hypocrisy of it, you've heard a speech from the Prime Minister in which he has said, we are the party that is going to unify everyone. All the people on the right, the Reform Party, they're the dividers. We want to oppose people who divide us. Yeah. And then they use language like the far right. They say that basically, they insinuate that Reform supporters are racist. What they are doing is the type of divisive politics which they claim to be above, which really makes you realise when these people say people who want to divide us, they mean people who disagree with us.
They want it, in my view, it's pretty straightforward. They want people who are maybe slightly on the fence about voting Reform or backing Nigel Farage to not do it, just in case everyone else calls them a racist, just in case they're worried about seeming like they're a racist. I think that's what they want to do. It's demonising, smearing people on a mass scale.
I mean, I think one of the big problems here is that he is ignoring people, wholesale ignoring people and what makes them worried, what makes them fearful about the future. And that's what troubles me about this speech. I think the strategy of actually choosing an overarching theme was probably right, but it was poorly implemented. You simply can't keep criticising people who've got bona fide concerns about what's going on in this country and not address them. It's not enough to do flag waving. It's not enough to do this patriotism speech when we're actually worried about the tax increases coming our way, about the possible loss eventually of the triple lock, about benefits that need to be cut. I mean, it's just not enough.
You've got the deputy leader of the Labour Party there, David Lammy, coming out and trumpeting this complete fallacy that Nigel Farage flirted with the Hitler Youth, knowing full well that people will see that and basically think that that could justify some violent action against Nigel Farage, Jonathan.
Well, look, I think that those comments came from school reports, the reports that Farage's teachers may have made about Farage's political leanings at school. I think it's completely legitimate to look at the history of Nigel Farage's politics, the things that he's said. He's made a litany of what I consider to be deeply offensive comments his whole career. Now, that doesn't change the fact...
Like what?
Well, when he talked about Muslims being a fifth column, when he talked about the Jewish lobby and George Soros, which said the British Board of Deputies, the British Jews said was anti-Semitic, when he said that people should be banned from coming here if they had HIV, the Breaking Point poster, misogynistic comments such as women who had kids were worth much less to employers than men, his admiration for Putin. I could go on and on. This is a deeply offensive politician, in my view, and a lot of the things he said are, in my view, racist. A lot of the policies that Reform is putting across are, in my view, racist. Now, when you say that that is inciting violence in some way. First of all, I find hypocrisy absolutely extraordinary because we always hear from the right that speech is not violence. That's why Lucy Connolly, Graham Linehan, etc.
This is the difference, isn't it? Because if you say that someone is basically Hitler or like Hitler or who likes Hitler, what that would just... I mean, if we were facing Hitler now in this country, I would pick up arms and fight against that. It legitimises someone who maybe has got a bit of a screw loose or is a bit vulnerable or something like that, thinking, we need to kill this guy because he is that level of evil. And I wonder whether or not today...
J.D. Vance said that Trump might be America's Hitler. It's not inciting... It's not inciting violence to say that someone's racist, I'm sorry.
Well, he didn't say that, did he? He said he flirted with the Hitler Youth.
In terms of the letter of the law, it is not incitement to violence, but the term I used is it creates a permission structure for someone with a screw loose to actually go out there and say that violence is permissible. But, you know, in terms of political strategy, Patrick, the thing which actually doesn't concern me is whether or not this will make a jot of difference. You would have thought after Brexit, you would have thought after Trump, that these people would have realised that calling your opponents racist, Nazi bigots, like, suddenly isn't necessarily the best strategy. It does not work. It weaponises people against you when you look down on them and you condescend them in this sort of way. So this is something which, again, if Reform are looking at this now, I think they're probably deep down pretty happy with it.
That's my point. Really, Sir Keir Starmer should have risen above all of this. I mean, I've been saying constantly on air over recent weeks, yet he keeps going on about Nigel Farage, Nigel Farage and Nigel Farage. I counted at least 4 times he made a direct reference to his name, and another 4 times he made a direct reference to to the actual party Reform. He's got to stop repeating this all the time. What's wrong with creating a strategy that might appeal to people and push that forward?
Well, it's a self-fulfilling circle, isn't it? Because Reform is ahead in the polls. We all can see that.
Yeah.
Nigel Farage is much more likely to be the next Prime Minister than Kemi Badenoch, who obviously doesn't have a hope in hell of even being leader of the next election, let alone Prime Minister. So clearly that's who the opponent is, and he has every right to call it out. Well, you know, I think that Labour needs to take the argument, the attack to Farage, because they've ceded all of the arguments to Farage.
David Lammy's got form with just calling loads of people Nazis, right? So Trump, neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating sociopath. I think he called the European Research Group worse than the Nazis. He wheels out the Nazi thing so freely. And you look at him doing that today, which he was wrong about, and then he's had to go off humiliatingly and embarrassingly, get back on BBC News, try to rectify it, completely take the shine off Starmer's thing. Is there a bigger concern here that maybe David Lammy is just a bit too thick to be anywhere near power?
Actually, I know that David Lammy is your hobby horse. We've talked about this many times. I don't think that I think he's a highly intelligent person.
He was on Mastermind, and it did not shine through. It did not shine through.
Patrick, we can have a conversation about David Lammy. I think it's much more interesting to have a conversation about the incitement of violence and the freedom of speech in this country. And I think I just do have to keep coming back to the naked and shameless hypocrisy of the right on this topic. When I see the things that people say to me personally about treason, far left, hating Britain, and then just someone saying that someone's a racist, that's inciting violence. Do me a favour, come on.
Can I just say, Jonathan, you're saying that obviously Labour are behind Reform by some distance now. Therefore, he has to take the fight head-on. Why don't you retrack a bit and ask yourself, why is Labour so far behind in the polls? And one of the reasons why they're so far behind in the polls is because Keir Starmer is not a leader. He's a manager, not a leader. Now, the military would say, lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Well, look, we can certainly have a conversation about whether Starmer should be leading the next election.
I just wanted to just quickly on this, because Jonathan does actually raise an interesting point there, and this is now Labour's response to Nigel Farage's response, which is to call him a snowflake. Say, snowflake, 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 you're being a snowflake for bothering about being called a racist, or in the case of David Lammy, mentioning stuff about Hitler. Is it snowflakery?
It's not snowflakery if they're calling Nigel Farage old or a bit overweight or, you know, any number of schoolboy bully taunts. It does cross the line where you go into racial identity politics, which some people see as a life or death struggle. Same with the trans thing. If you go into that sort of realm where many people see it as being core to their identity, and if their identity is challenged, they can use violence to prevent it from being challenged. That is not snowflakery. That is a permission structure for violence.
But by the way, just quickly, this is the front of... I know we do the front pages a bit later on, but this is the front of The Independent tomorrow, and it's Starmer, we will never surrender Britain to the enemy Farage. And again, look, you know, I get it, you know, we've had... There's no doubt, Jonathan will point out, the Daily Mail did an infamous front page about judges being the enemies of the people, all of that stuff, OK. But I do just wonder with that, you know, we will never surrender Britain to the enemy Farage in the kind of climate that we're in at the minute. What are they trying to do with this use of language? You know, the left always bang on about use of language, don't they? Do they know what they're doing here?